Sandra, my mother wants to talk to you about the inheritance. Give her a call. My husband told me a few days after my father passed away. What? Why? I asked, stunned. The loss of my father was still fresh, and I was deep in grief. My husband, however, seemed completely unaffected. Why is your mother concerned about my father's inheritance? I pressed. I don't know, he shrugged. Just call her tomorrow. His indifference cut deep. When did he become like this? My name is Sandra. I'm 48 and work for a company. I took a break from my career to raise our son, Robert, but returned to work afterward. My husband, Aaron, is the same age as me, and we both work at the same company. We married young at 22 and had Robert the following year. Having spent half our lives together, we used to be close, but lately I've been noticing an unpleasant side of him. When Robert was 3, my husband suddenly announced, "I'm quitting my job." Why? I asked, alarmed. I don't like my boss, Aaron replied. I deserve a higher salary. Everyone else is leaving for better opportunities. I should too. Aaron was always easily influenced by others, a habit that often led him astray. This job switch wasn't an improvement. While he got a slight raise, he didn't fit in with his new colleagues and found the work tedious. He used to be more energetic when we worked together, but over time, he became dull. Lately, his only source of enjoyment seems to be visiting his parents' house. They live about 30 minutes away, and he goes there almost every weekend. Initially, I accompanied him. But as the visits became too frequent, I opted to stay home with Robert. Many of Aaron's old friends live near his parents, and I suspect he clings to them since he lacks close friends at work. Why don't we spend more time as a family instead of always going to your parents' house? I suggested. Aaron dismissed the idea. Robert doesn't even like me. As a result, our family outings were rare. Instead, Robert and I spent more time with my parents. My father was a careful investor and had acquired real estate during the bubble economy, generating passive income. He also worked as a regular company employee, so we were fairly well off. He often picked us up in his car when we went out. My in-laws, on the other hand, never invited Robert over. It seemed they favored their son over their grandson. Life carried on this way until Robert entered junior high, at which point our visits to my in-laws became less frequent. My father was saddened by this. At one point, he bought a high-rise condominium being built near our home. When I asked why, he said, "You can see fireworks from there." He remembered how much Robert loved watching fireworks and thought this would bring him joy. By the time my parents moved into the condo, Robert was already in high school, but he was excited when I told him about my father's idea. Since then, we gathered there every year for the fireworks festival. My mother had always been in fragile health, and she eventually passed away. Though expected, it was still painful. However, we never missed a fireworks festival at my father's place. When Robert turned 20 and shared a drink with my father at the festival, my father was overjoyed. Aaron, on the other hand, only visited once. The next time he saw my father was at my mother's funeral. My husband remains easily influenced. If someone at work mentions cleaning their house, he suddenly starts tidying up. If someone talks about taking their kids somewhere, he suddenly wants to do the same, though he rarely follows through. I never thought he was a bad person, he just lacked initiative. I accepted this because our life was still comfortable, but everything changed. My father collapsed at work and passed away. His colleagues called an ambulance, but he didn't make it. The doctors said it was an acute myocardial infarction. If he had been alone at home, he might not have been found for days. Perhaps it was better this way. Aaron and Robert arrived at the hospital, but they were too late. We held the funeral still in mourning. Then, someone unexpected approached me. "Sandra, how are you holding up?" It was my mother-in-law. We weren't particularly close, so I assumed she was expressing concern. Instead, she said, "That high-rise condo is in a prime redevelopment area. You could get a good price if you sell now." I was stunned. "At least you don't have to worry about money," she added. I hadn't even thought about the inheritance yet, but here they were, already discussing it. I swallowed my frustration and said, "I'll take my time deciding." Then, I asked them to leave. Later, Aaron asked, "Is it true the condo could sell for a high price?" I remembered my father mentioning the redevelopment plans, but hearing Aaron ask about it now irritated me. A few days later, Aaron repeated, "My mom wants to talk to you about the inheritance." "Why is she involved in this?" I asked, exasperated. "I don't know, just call her." My patience wore thin. The next day, I avoided calling her, but she called me instead. "You're selling the condo, right? I can introduce you to a real estate agent," she said. "I never said I was selling it," I replied. "You should act quickly. Let me know, I'll help you." Then she hung up. That evening, I told Aaron about the conversation. "Do you plan to live there?" he asked. "It's not very convenient," I admitted. "Maybe selling is the best option." I was still weighing my choices. But my mother-in-law wouldn't stop. She kept pressing about the sale, even suggesting real estate agents. Finally, I told her, "I have friends in real estate. I'll handle it. This is my decision." "We're family, you can rely on us," she insisted, now calling frequently despite never doing so before. I eventually consulted a trusted real estate agent and decided to sell. When I informed Aaron and his mother, her calls finally stopped. I felt relieved. 3 months later, a buyer was found. The price was even higher than I had expected. That evening, Aaron came home and casually asked, "So, how much did it sell for?" Caught off guard, I lied, "It hasn't sold yet. No offers so far." The next day, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, my in-laws stood there. "Aaron, your parents are here," I called out, confused. Aaron welcomed them inside. Then, without a word, my mother-in-law handed me a piece of paper. When I glanced down at the document in my hands, I realized with shock that it was divorce papers. "Ha," I murmured, utterly confused. With a sharp tone, my mother-in-law said, "Sandra, how long do you plan to depend on Aaron? He's been coming home frequently because he feels suffocated living with you." There were so many things wrong with what she said that I didn't even know where to begin. I turned to my husband and asked, "Is this really how you feel?" He nodded, confirming my worst fears. I was baffled. We had never even discussed this before. Aaron continued, "If we divorce and split the money, we'll both be financially stable for a while, won't we?" His parents nodded in agreement, clearly in on this plan. My mind raced as I tried to process everything. A friend of mine, a real estate agent, had previously mentioned that the high-rise condominium we sold had brought in a substantial amount of money. It seemed Aaron had taken this information seriously and was considering it in his decision. I stared at them stunned. Who are these people? How could they do this to me? While I was still in shock, Aaron began filling out the divorce papers right in front of me. I couldn't believe it. He actually intended to go through with it. Did my in-laws want him to move back in with them, or did they just hate me? I wondered silently. They must have whispered things into Aaron's ear, convincing him this was a good idea. He probably believed he could secure my father's inheritance all for himself if we divorced. But what he didn't know was that inherited property isn't subject to division in a divorce. I swiftly snatched the divorce papers from his hands and filled them out on the spot. "I'll handle it," I said coolly, handing them back to him. Aaron shrugged. "It's too much trouble, so just do it. I'm leaving anyway. You can live here." He left with his parents, dragging his suitcase behind him. "I'll come back for my bigger stuff later," he added before walking out the door. It was clear he had planned this all along with my in-laws, waiting for the right moment to leave. There was nothing left to say to him, so I called my son, Robert, and told him everything. "What? What's going on?" Robert was furious. After a moment of silence, he said, "Hold off on submitting those divorce papers for now." When I asked why, he didn't give me a direct answer, but I could tell he was thinking deeply about something, so I decided to trust him and wait. A week later, Robert came to my house. "They planned this from the start," he said, placing several photographs on the table. The pictures were of my in-laws' house, but it wasn't the old home I remembered. It had been completely rebuilt. "A friend of mine lives nearby and took these photos," Robert explained. Apparently, my in-laws had been boasting around the neighborhood about their newly rebuilt house. Robert's friend, playing detective, had gathered even more evidence. Robert placed another photo on the table. It showed my husband with a woman I didn't recognize. "My friend caught them together," Robert said, his voice laced with anger. The next photo was even worse. It showed Aaron and the woman entering a hotel together, arms wrapped around each other. There were also pictures of the two of them entering my in-laws' house side by side. I was dumbfounded. Was he cheating all this time? Did he visit his parents' house so often just to see her? I thought. And if they entered the house together, that meant my in-laws had knowingly approved of their affair. Robert provided more information. Dad's planning to marry her soon. That's why they rebuilt the house, he revealed. I was amazed at how much evidence Robert and his friend had gathered. With all this proof, I could demand compensation and move forward with the divorce on my own terms. Of course, I wasn't about to let Aaron get a single cent from the sale of my father's high-rise condominium. I decided to hire a lawyer. The following weekend, Aaron called. "Hey, why haven't you submitted the divorce papers yet?" he asked, his tone irritable. "Oh, I've been busy. Getting to City Hall isn't exactly my top priority," I said calmly. "Why are you in such a rush? Are you eager to remarry?" I added playfully, testing him. He immediately grew defensive. "What are you talking about? If you don't submit those papers soon, I'll get a lawyer to force the divorce," he snapped. I smirked. "That's fine. I've already consulted a lawyer myself." "Huh? A lawyer?" he stammered. "Yes, and I'll be seeking compensation." His voice wavered. "Compensation? For what?" "For your infidelity. You cheated on me every time you went back to your parents' house. How long has this been going on?" I asked. No, he tried to defend himself. "She's just a high school friend. We only got together after I moved back in with my parents. It's only been about 2 years. Oops, he had just admitted to everything. "Ho, 2 years? A high school friend? Thanks for the useful information," I said smugly. He tried to laugh it off nervously. "Yeah, but we're getting married soon. If you don't submit the divorce papers, it'll delay our plans. Both our families have already agreed." "You're talking a lot, but have you thought this through?" I asked, hearing his nervous chuckle. "Even if we get divorced, our assets will be split. The money from selling your father's condominium is a huge amount, even after division. Compensation won't be much," he claimed confidently. I sighed. "Did you use that money to rebuild your parents' house?" "Well, I took out a loan, but once we divide the assets, I can pay it off," he said, sounding hopeful. I shook my head in disbelief. "Aaron, inherited property isn't subject to division in a divorce." "What?" he blurted out. "Didn't you or your parents know that?" I asked, amused. "You really jumped the gun, rebuilding that house." Then, I checked the time. It was almost perfect. "By the way, Aaron, are you home now?" I asked casually. "Yeah, why?" he answered. "Well, I'll be there soon," I said, just as the intercom rang in the background. "Robert?" Aaron's surprised voice echoed through the phone. Robert had gone to see Aaron with my lawyer. In the end, I successfully claimed damages for his infidelity, and we got divorced. Later, I heard that the woman Aaron cheated with had been led to believe he was already divorced, so she sued him for marriage fraud. As for my in-laws, they had just finished rebuilding their house, only to have to put it up for sale. Aaron, meanwhile, hadn't quit his job, so he likely moved into company housing or back with his parents. At least he still had a roof over his head. I wished him luck. I used the money from selling my father's condominium to buy a well-located new home. Robert mentioned he and his girlfriend would visit me this summer because we could watch the fireworks together from there. Imagining my son's future wedding, I felt nothing but gratitude for how far we had come. Thanks for watching. See you again in the next video. Stay stunned.